Resumed the composition at 3:26 p.m. Central Standard Time. When it comes to considering audit of the Department of State's fiscal year 2019 implementation of the Digital Accountability and Transparency Act of 2014, there are two major areas for consideration. One, that there are allegedly inaccuracies in reporting of transactions that are domestic in origin, and two, that there was no information available on transactions that were originating from foreign post. The date under consideration was for the fiscal year of 2018 to 2019. In the reporting, quote, finding A, domestic data submitted to Treasury was not always complete, accurate, or timely and considered of moderate quality, end quote, identifies itself as being about data originating domestically. However, begins by describing how there was no data available at all for posts of foreign origin. It then describes the details of the finding regarding domestic data. The first paragraph of the section discusses, quote, completeness, accuracy, timeliness, or quality, end quote, page 7, of data originating overseas. Quote, the department's SAO did not certify transactions that originated at overseas post during the first quarter of FY 2019, end quote, page 7. It is important, however, to consider that, at least in the state of Texas, the acronym for the Auditor's Office is also SAO, for State Auditor's Office. For the United States Department of State, SAO means Senior Accountable Official in the text of the report. Second page after cover page, page 2, footnote page 26, page 27, as well as page 4 in subhead with no acronym, but is listed in the abbreviations as Senior Accountability Official, page 42. Then, in the second paragraph, it discusses domestic origin data before a subheading of, quote, accuracy, completeness, and timeliness of overseas data, end quote, page 8. Notice that there is missing a qualifier at this point that was apparent in the earlier recounting, namely, quote, quality, end quote. This provides the considerations of, quote, timeliness, end quote, with a specific function. This, quote, pattern, end quote, has been apparent for at least the last 2 years in various paradigms and includes a form of, quote, hacking, end quote, that redirects data from one chain or structural element to another at the appearance of whatever is represented or ascribed to the third element. According to the second paragraph, quote, the department's SAO did not certify the 7,894 transactions that originated at overseas posts during the first quarter of FY 2019, end quote, pages 8 through 9. Additionally, quote, these amounts represent less than 5% of the total dollar amount of all worldwide procurement and financial assistance awards executed during the first quarter of FY 2019, end quote, page 9. Again, there is concern regarding the overlap with demarcators specific to the state of Texas. According to the Texas Comptroller Code, the state is not allowed to allocate any more than 5% of its total budget per year to derivatives. Without specific contextualization of what is meant by, quote, the total dollar amount of all worldwide procurement and financial assistance awards, end quote, page 9, especially in consideration of a refusal to identify the origin of, quote, foreign, end quote, post to accounts connected to or through the United States Department of State, then there are necessarily other concerns regarding, quote, substitution, end quote, and, quote, swapping, end quote, as will be discussed later. Among these was, quote, specifically, the CGFS reconciliation identified variances related to overseas data of up to 85%, end quote, page 9. If the United States Department of State were using this system to engage a hedging strategy with an 80-20 paradigm, then they would be coded to default one way. What then does that mean insofar as the auditor has presented the information in this report with an introduction to the foreign origin data under the alleged rubric of considering domestic origin data only to discuss these sorts of disparities in reporting? This leaves open possibilities for significant hedging on non-certified, quote, overseas, end quote, transactions. Does that enable a, quote, transaction, end quote, to be able to, quote, post, end quote, without, quote, certification, end quote, so that it can accrue liability for future leveraging? And where are the major hedges set up? By name, at least as referenced in the reports available within strategic time frames through the United States Department of State, there are in fact specific locations where there are major benchmarks already set up. As this report does not seek to be itself a specific, quote, benchmark, end quote, on any pre existing hedges, they will not be listed here. There are, however, significant correlations regarding public notices on specific conflict scenarios and other economic indicators regarding those places, as well as discernible and predictive patterns associated with corollary conflicts. This does leave open the possibility for strategic interception in the escalation up to a potential terrorist event. However, it is evident that is not the intent of this United States Department of State report's presentation of information or the manner in which it was accumulated. The audit report discusses the implementation of a, quote, Data Act broker, end quote, connected to and through the United States Department of Treasury. The Data Act has been implemented for several years prior to the report. Could that be connected to the manners in which priorities around reporting and auditing United States Department of State functions were designated? That is possible. But what does not add up is that the information input into the system regarding domestic transactions had a sort of incongruity that actually makes sense if considered with regard to concerns about illegal hedging, including illegal hedging that facilitates the conditions necessary for financing acts of terrorism.